to the school board meeting. For those of you that could make it on the tour, thank you for being there. We'll start with the call of order and the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is back there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's move on to item 3, which is approval of the agenda. There is an updated consent agenda, at least for teacher appointments, at your desk here. So if we could entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended for the teacher appointments, I would appreciate it. So we have a motion by Chris. Do we have a second? Second by Doug. Any questions or comments about the agenda? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 4, which is approval of the September 13th minutes. Are there any questions, corrections, additions to the September 13th minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second by Doug. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 5, which is citizen comments for non-agenda items. We have one citizen that would like to speak to us, and if we could try and limit it to 3 minutes, I appreciate it. And Jeremiah, I'm sorry, I can't read your last name, but thank you for being here. If you wouldn't go to the mic and turn it on, I appreciate that.
So last name's Newbert. So I just wanted to come and talk about the mask mandate. So, you guys implemented that mask mandate a while ago on Friday, and you showed a complete tone deafness to the community. And the lack of people coming and talking to you shows that you don't have the belief in the community that you're going to listen to them. And it showed in all your referendums that you asked for and everything else. The fact that kids are extremely unlikely to get severe COVID-19. Just to give you an example of how unlikely they are to get severe COVID-19, they are more likely to die from the vaccine than they are from the virus. So about the CDC says 8.2 people per million die from the vaccine. If you run that number with 50 million kids in COVID, you'll find out that more kids would die from the COVID vaccine than from the actual virus. One could forgive the board for the mask mandate if there was no significant evidence of damage it is doing to students. First, there's health issues that are generated by the mandates. Have you guys seen what kids do? When they come to school, they wear a cloth mask. They take that cloth mask off at the end of the day, shove it in their backpack, and sits there till the next day when they pull it out again. If you actually go look at studies recommending that looked at masks for third world countries, for nurses and medical professionals, they said not to recommend it. The reason they said not to recommend it was because chronic respiratory illness was associated with wearing masks day after day that were not properly cleaned. The only reason to actually have a mask mandate for kids is to protect adults, and especially the unvaccinated adults. We've offered all these adults easy prevention, a vaccine. If you take it, you're safe. There's no need to mask kids to protect adults if they've chosen not to take the cure that we offer them. So I just don't understand why this is. Why you guys would continue on with this mask mandate stuff. Even like maybe instead of being a representative of what this country is right now, which is that just because I'm in power, I'm going to force you to do whatever I want, maybe you could have looked at more compassionate things. Things like setting up some mask optional classrooms, some mask mandated classrooms, and then asking kids to wear masks in the hallway. This seems like a reasonable thing to do, a reasonable thing that a thoughtful group of adults would do. Instead, you guys have chosen that we can force your kids to wear masks. There's nothing you can do about it. We don't care what you have to say. The last thing I want to say before I get out of here is, and I just lost my train of thought. The misinformation in your presentation. So on that Friday presentation, you guys said things like herd immunity. No scientist right now believes that herd immunity is possible with this virus. It is moving to an endemic, which means that next year at this time, you're going to be dealing with similar situation. So you guys need to figure out exactly how you're going to deal with this. It's not going away. Things like were said in that meeting, hopefully we won't get another variant. There's lots more variant coming. There's 2 more variants right now since that meeting, the Mu and the R1, both of concern to the CDC. So you guys need to figure it out. And Joel Walls, who is in here talking to you guys, do you know what Joel did after he got done with that meeting? He went to a birthday party with 30-some adults unmasked. When asked how many kids died in North Dakota from COVID-19, he smiled and said, I think a handful. Is that your informed expert? Do you know how many kids have died in North Dakota from COVID-19, 17 and under? Your silence speaks volumes. 0. 0 kids in North Dakota have died from COVID-19, 17 and under. That's a fact. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Newbert. Let's move on to item 6, which is superintendent's recommendations for discussions. Review of the school board meeting norms, which is on page 5. Amber.
Be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other. Exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation. Be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public. Speak up when the norms are not followed. Advocate on behalf of students and keep the community in mind. Lead by policy. Serve as advocates for K-12 public education. Entrust the day-to-day operations to the professionals. Assist community members and stakeholders in following the chain of command.
Thank you, Amber. Let's move on to item 6B, which is a public hearing on the FY 2021-2022 tax levy. The memo is on page 6. Mr. Berge.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just read through the memorandum as it's fairly technical in the wording. At its August 9th, 2021 school board meeting, the school board authorized the preliminary budget and tax levy, which called for a total of 101 mills. This preliminary budget and tax levy was certified to the county auditor as required by state law, and notices of estimated property tax and budget hearing dates were sent to each owner of taxable property in the district, with a total estimated property tax of at least $100. The total Grand Forks Public School District property tax levy for fiscal year 21 to 2022 will either be 101.0 mills, the same as for fiscal year 2020 to 2021, or a 10 mil increase to 111.0 mills, pending the outcome of the September 28, 2021 special election. Should the September 28, 2021 election for 10 additional building fund mills be successful, the 2021 to 22 mill levy will increase to 111.0 mills, or a 9.9% increase. Citizens should be given an opportunity to present oral or written arguments regarding the district's property or proposed fiscal year 21 to 22 budget. Final approval of the fiscal year 21 to 22 budget and property tax levy will occur later during this September 27th, 2021 school board meeting. So in effect, we're required to have a public hearing and allow for anybody to either give written or oral comments.
Thank you, Mr. Berge. We have one audience participant. I don't know if Pam wants to speak to us at this point about the tax levy. You're the only one in the room, so. Thank you. Do we have to do anything else, Mr. Berge?
No, we just have to offer the opportunity for citizen comments, so there's no board action on this particular item.
Thank you. Let's move on to items.
Just a second, Mr. President.
Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Aren't you technically supposed to open the public meeting and then actually close it? So I don't know if it needs to be a motion, but I think at least the technical is they have to physically open the meeting, the public hearing, and then now the public hearing's closed.
So I will declare that the public meeting is open. And I will declare that the public meeting is closed since we have nobody that wants to offer comments. And there also is the opportunity for written comments, correct, Mr. Berge?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Let's move on to item 6C, which is Indigenous Peoples Day. That's on page 7 and 8 of your electronic packet. Dr. Lewis.
Thank you, President Lund. I am just absolutely thrilled to share with you about the second Indigenous Peoples Day that we will be holding on October 11th, and that will be held about 6:30 p.m. until 8. And I say about because the city has graciously agreed to hold that at City Hall for us, and we just have to wait until the committee of the whole is over. So we are excited to have it there. One of the new additions this year is that some of our students will be creating artwork that will be on display there to really celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. So we are absolutely excited with the additions that we have, as well as just looking forward to an event where we can all gather, learn more, and celebrate. In your memo, there's some different resources, et cetera, that we have. We fully understand that potentially this meeting will not be done by 6:30, but that is just fine. The event is set up in such a way that when our board members are finished with our meeting, they can just pop right over there, and you'll still be able to see the event and so forth. So we're very excited to have this. It has been mostly organized by Courtney, and then other folks have helped and supported. So we're very excited for this event.
Questions or comments for Dr. Lewis? I know under announcements at the end of the meeting, Dr. Brenner will have some comments about trying to shorten our meeting on October 11th so we can try and all get there on time. Any further questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Let's move on to item 6D, which is a debrief of the school board retreat training on electronic page 9. Dr. Brenner.
Yeah, you have a memo in front of you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Leck met with us on August 23rd at the Hilton Garden Inn, and he shared a number of topics, agenda items, and talking points. And I asked you prior to today's meeting if you would think about at least three takeaways that you had from that training and see what might be implementable at the board level. So I thought we could spend just a few minutes tonight talking about your observations, your perspectives, and what might be good for the board leadership and myself as superintendent to start adding some different flavor to our school board meetings. So I would just open it up for conversation.
Well, I'll go first since then we can get the ball going. I wrote down two. I didn't write down three. I wrote down two. One is I think educational sessions within our board meetings, small educational sessions like he talked about, I think would be important. I think the other thing is having regular board retreats, and I realize that got goofed up somewhat because of the COVID pandemic, but I think having regular board retreats, at least annually, if not more, I think it is helpful as a board. We develop and grow as a board when we can get together outside of this boardroom, even though technically we're at the board at that time. So those are the couple of takeaways I had. Go ahead, Cynthia.
So I had the same one about dedicating a portion of the board meeting for training. I did look at those 8 characteristics of effective school boards, and one of the takeaways there was to have data presented about student learning and assessment, and we do that, but we don't do it, I don't think, maybe as regularly as often as we could be doing it, and maybe not all the data at one meeting, so smaller chunks. And then so then one question I had was, Dr. Brenner communicates school board news to the staff every Friday through the Friday Focus. There's a portion of the Friday Focus where he says, now for school board news, and then talks about school board news. How can we, so this is a question, not doable. How can we improve school board news to the broader community? And because the 8 characteristics included both community and staff. So that was a question. And then the other takeaway that I had that isn't, so I don't know if this fits, but just the board president as the media spokesperson was brought out at the meeting. And that was something that I recalled.
Thank you, Cynthia. Go ahead, Doug.
Just a couple of things. I like the idea he mentioned in there, and it was in the materials, about having a governance committee. Now, he kind of alluded that he thought we had one, because we have the norms, well, we really don't. And I think the topics at that committee, I think it would be good if we had that, and it dealt with board education, mentoring, all those things, I think would be appropriate and would be beneficial to this board. And I particularly think we need to also emphasize, the state and local training, not just what we might do on board nights. So I thought, the deal on data information, that maybe should something be more frequently be on our agenda, so that we would monitor instruction closer and have a better handle on what's going on a day-to-day. Not that we need to know everything, but just that we know if some surveys have gone out, or we've got some report, or we're generating, different things that some of that, more of that come back, just so the board is more aware of it. And then for training topics, I mean, a couple of things that he talked about that I think maybe we could do more in depth was the part on board dysfunction, which talked about micromanaging, firefighting, and rubber stamping. And, more specifically, what some of those things, what are specific examples? And we seem right now to be doing an awful lot of firefighting. And we need to probably start looking at expanding our time frame and as to what we are looking at. So I think that would be a topic that we could deal with. So, and then there was also the quarterback on each issue, and I think that's something we should probably talk about, and could be a training topic too, to how do you decide that, when is it appropriate, it's the board or the superintendent. And so those are kind of the takeaways that I had from that session.
Thank you, Doug. Amber?
I liked the analogy activity that we did, where there was 4 quadrants of like human resources, systematic or symbolic, like how do you view sort of how you make decisions. And I think that just made me take a step back and always think about, we each are coming at this specific meeting or this specific topic at a different angle. So valuing those perspectives, but also understanding that, sometimes that then creates some disagreement, and it's okay to have that. I think the education would be great to kind of just keep our sword sharpened. One of the things that I think the governance committee could do, also as an extension of what you talked about, Doug, is to better identify how, we have certain committees that are outside the school district that we're on, and I don't know that we have the best process of like, how do we bring that information back, whether it's an update, whether it's a debriefing with the president and the superintendent, and then there's an update. But some of those outside committees, there may not be as good of a avenue to bring back that information. I really liked the quarterback analogy, just kind of understanding who's kind of taking the lead on this issue and who's more in a supporting role. And then I think we've talked about the strategic plan and it being developed and looked at often, but I don't know the last time this board has actively seen that or actively used that. And so it would be nice when we're making decisions or when items are up for action. I think a thing that we could do with that is either label each action item, like how it fits within the strategic plan, or potentially just state, here's where this fits in our strategic plan. So we're constantly going back to that document that we've approved and helped create to make sure that we're making decisions based on what's in that document as priorities.
Thank you. I appreciated in Dr. Leck's football analogy that there was not a punter anywhere in the group. There were quarterbacks, but no punters. So, go ahead, Jeff.
I also like that firefighting analogy there. I think we're doing a bit of that as well. Another couple items here. We need to recognize not only the importance of hearing, but also respecting multiple perspectives. when making decisions. And I would like to see the 8 characteristics of effective school boards, if we can somehow merge that into our school board self-assessment survey so that we make sure that we're hitting those every year.
Thanks, Jeff. Chris?
Thank you, Dr. Lund. Feeding off of a lot of what has just been said, and I would follow what Mr. Manley said, is having mutual trust and being a united team. And it's very important that we each come in and certainly can disagree and have our voices heard, yet at the end of the day, we should be respectful, understanding, and be united with the decisions that are made. Because if we were always agreeing, that would be very dysfunctional. Disagreement is always good. It creates additional conversation. It makes us think. And again, being that mutual trust in one another, that when one of us speaks and we've said our piece, at the end when it's done, and it's important that we continue to do the good work that we're supposed to be doing at the end of the day to serve the students of Grand Forks.
Thank you, Chris. Shannon?
The biggest takeaway I had, I think and it's kind of a reality. I think we do a lot of things, but we don't know why we do certain things, and we don't know what the expectation is when we're walking into the things that we're being asked to do. So that kind of ties back to the quarterbacking component. That's something that I think needs to be a little bit clearer with every decision that's brought to the board. Is it really are you asking us to make the decision, or is this something that we're just in a supporting role and you're informing us that this is the decision and here's why? So that was my biggest takeaway from it. I think it's nice to try to start doing more things, but I think honestly, I'm more interested in hearing what we're going to stop doing at a board level and a district level, because I don't think we're doing anything super, super well because we are in too much of a firefighter mode. So, the board retreat was great, but I think there's a lot of aspirational things that we got to stop and figure out, like, how are we going to fit some of these aspirational things in, because I feel tapped out. I don't have much more to give. So I can only imagine what our administrators feel, because I'm just on the sidelines watching a lot of this stuff happen. So I think that's a takeaway for me. Yeah.
Thank you, Shannon. Dr. Brenner, you have any clarifying questions for us on our comments?
No, not at all. You talked about all the things that I had written down. One of the leadership courses that I often taught at UND in ed leadership was the 4 frames of leadership, so it wasn't surprising that Dr. Leck brought that up. And for me as superintendent, one of the things that I've always shared with graduate students, aspiring principals and superintendents, is it's really important not to get stuck in one frame of leadership, because when you do, then you have a hard time navigating and making good decisions. So, but I know at this level, particularly the last 18 to 20 months, it's probably we've all been functioning more in the political frame of leadership than anything else, because there have just been a lot of internal and external forces on all of us. But so I just offer that as a comment. And in the roles and responsibilities grid, I thought was a nice one-pager that could be a good reminder in each of our agenda items relative to who does what. So I certainly appreciate the feedback, and Dr. Leck, as I said in my memo, is certainly interested in coming back mid-year, February, March. And if you would like him to do that, we can start working on a date or a school board meeting date, if you're interested.
Go ahead, Amber.
One thing I forgot as a suggestion was, so I'm attending Wake Up to UND tomorrow, and that's sort of like a state of the address for UND, and the city has that as well, sort of the state of the city. And so to Cynthia's point about outwardly communicating to the community, I wonder if there's an opportunity where we could do like a state of the schools for a community-wide presentation, or because we're under the city, if there was a partnership to include the school district as an update within that program. And then it seems like we've lost our celebrating success portion of our agenda. And going back to the firefighting analogy, it's really hard to be intentional about all the successful things we have going on when we're firefighting. And so I think that that is just a good positive way for us to start a lot of our meetings, even if there's maybe not an opportunity for someone to come and present to us, but that we're making a point at the start of each meeting to celebrate some of the successes within our district, whether it's student recognition or achievements from students, programs, whether it's teacher recognition. I think that's a really positive way to start.
Thank you. I think the intention is to continue the celebrating success on the off-tour times. So one meeting would be the tour, the next meeting would be celebrating success. So thank you. Let's move on to item 6E, which is a debrief of Wilder Elementary School building tour. That's on page 76 of your electronic packet, a memo from Dr. Brenner. And I think we could all read that, the overall impression of the facility, in particular interior, exterior, and green space. For those of you that were on the tour, thoughts, comments people have? Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. And Dr. Lund, you mentioned this there. One of the things that I have noticed is each of these buildings, some are older, of course, and we've been through mostly older buildings thus far. The maintenance and upkeep of the schools, they may be old, yet the appearances are amazing. It's a true dedication to the staff. And the other thing that I've taken away is the principals working in a manner to assure that they're using the space as effectively as possible with as little disruption as possible. And it's evident that can be very challenging into the day in and day out needs from the students and the requirements of what's taking place, yet it seems to be working well in their planning and coordinating. So I thought the Wilder tour was quite, was well done. Certainly we all recognize that the issue of parking there and its limited space certainly plays into what all takes place there as well. Thank you.
Other board members' thoughts? Go ahead, Doug.
I echo Chris's, that how well taken care of these buildings are. I think that what I took away from Wilder in particular was, at least all the classrooms in the building part, not the portables, had lots of windows, which was a stark difference from when we toured Winship, which had a couple very small windows and then a lot of rooms that didn't have any. So I thought that was good. Having the portables there, they looked fairly crowded and cramped because there was a lot of kids in each of those. I don't think it's certainly not the best learning atmosphere for them to be going in and out and functioning in there. So it certainly are things to do there, but overall it's fairly, as I commented, I don't know to who, that if I was a kid, I'd just soon be going to Wilder than Winship. Even though Winship does a really good job making that building appear best from the size of the classrooms and the natural light that at least was available, it just felt more, a better learning environment than Winship.
Thank you. Any other comments? Jeff, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I find myself agreeing with these guys too. In the actual building itself, great spaces in there, not super crowded, but I asked the principal there too about that, and she said, the number of students per room changes, of course, every year, things like that. So this just happens to be a perfect year. Everything just fits in there just right. Well, aside from the 4 classrooms out in the relocatables outside. Parking issues, we have parking issues there. Yeah, sort of the same stuff.
Thank you. Jackie?
I'm, hadn't really been in Wilder for many, many years, if at all. And so for me, I was a little taken aback by how small it feels compared to the outside of the building. And the relocatables those are quite smaller than I expected them to feel. One of my main concerns was actually security. Just the office is kind of off to the side to really see whoever's coming in without just automatically buzzing them in, I think takes, you can see them, but you'd have to take a step. And of course, having students for classrooms outside of the main building is a concern when it comes to security as well.
Thank you, and I would echo similar thoughts from all of you. The other thing I would point out is the lack of flexibility. I mean, it's building that was originally built in the 50s and added on, and there's just not a lot of flexible spaces to do other things there as well. So go ahead, Amber.
I just want to say, so I didn't go to Winship, or Wilder, but last time at the board table, I spoke about Wilder instead of Winship, and I think there was probably some of you that knew I was doing that and didn't correct me so I wouldn't feel like an idiot, but I wanted to give a permission for all of us to be in that space to say, hey, don't you mean Wilder? So thanks for not correcting me, but I just felt a little taken aback by, so thanks for not embarrassing me, but it's okay to have some fun. So I didn't go on the tour. I echo some of the same comments, though, just, again, driving by the buildings and having been in them for some other things. I think sometimes when you have, like, one section schools, that becomes a little more difficult as well to navigate, especially if there's issues with the student or learning environment and things like that. But aside from that, I didn't go on the tour today.
Thank you. Now I'm going to have to go back and look at that YouTube of the meeting. So go ahead, Cynthia.
So a couple, walkability is quite good at that school. Doug asked a question about, the Riverside area and coming across there. That's a very safe, walkable piece, which is great. I think the classroom sizes are really great. Notably is the lack of small group pullout opportunities, and people have already said that. The other real notice is the cafeteria and the use of the cafeteria for so many different things. So if you wanted to have something that lasted a little longer, the custodian has 10 minutes to get ready to get the next thing in there, which isn't a whole lot of time. But really great condition, and that's thanks to the custodial staff and all the teachers and what they do there. The other thing we commented on is the electricity looked a lot better than at Winship. I mean, we didn't see the huge electrical outlets like we did at Winship.
Any other final thoughts on the tour? Thank you all. Let's move on to superintendent's recommendations for actions. 7A is the consent agenda as amended at your desk. Do we have a motion and a second?
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
We have a motion by Cynthia and a second by Doug. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 7B, which is the fiscal year 2021-2022 district budget and tax levy certification of levy public. It's on electronic pages 81 through 91. Mr. Berge.
Thank you. I'll walk through the budget in a little bit short order. The subsequent pages are fairly comparable to the preliminary budget approved by the board in August, and I'll just kind of walk through some of the differences because there's about 10 pages of numbers there with some slight variations from the preliminary budget approval in August. The main thing is actually the bottom line change is a $200,000 decline in the bottom line compared to the preliminary budget, made up of a few different components. Interest income continues to drop, and so reduce that a fair amount based on actual numbers for the year. Tuition, and what I mean by tuition is between school districts, we have some students, from a special education perspective and other perspectives where other districts are paying us tuition. And that number, looking at kind of the last 4 or 5 years, but in particular the last year, a decline there reduced that budget by about $421,000. Conversely, on the expenses, the tuition the Grand Forks Public School District paid out for students in attending other districts, et cetera, reduced that by the same amount as the revenue, so that was really a wash. The biggest item is in the state per pupil payment. At the beginning of our school year here, we were about 44 students down from last year, and we're partially into the on-time funding, the way the direction the state legislature moved in the previous biennium. Last year was a 50% on-time funding. This year that we're in is a 60% on-time funding. So with a decline in early student numbers, of course, the payment that we get ultimately is based on the average daily enrollment for the entire school year. So obviously, don't have that number, but just kind of basing off of last year, I put in a decline in 50 students, and using 60% on-time funding, that reduced revenue by about $300,000. Looking at some of the federal title dollars, some of those actuals came in, after the fact, after June 30th, tweaked those upwards a little, and also based on final title allocations that I was able to see. So there's some tweaks in several line items, but ultimately, why don't I refer you to, the summary really is on page 91 electronically of the board packet. And so in the very right-hand column is the 21 to 22 budget. That towards the bottom, the first line that's yellow all the way across, the annual surplus / deficit. That deficit, with those minor adjustments to the budget, increased by $200,000 to just under $610,000. With the $3 million special reserve fund that we have allows for a transfer of 50% of that balance at the end of the year for general fund purposes in a situation where we're running deficits. That's projected to be about $636,000. So there's about just under a $25,000 overall surplus based on this budget for next year. So you can see the very bottom line, the ending general fund balance, where we're at is in that 7.391 million range, a slight increase projected for next year with this budget to a little over $7,418,000. Pages previous to that, and then I guess one thing I should mention is COVID related ESSER funding. I've placed in $6 million related for COVID revenue and COVID related costs, subject to reimbursement, $6 million. So those really offset each other. And so the other numbers that you see on here are really related to that baseline budget, excluding ESSER. The one item I was really waiting till in the last few days to verify was the salary and fringe benefits for our current fiscal year, as of course that's 85+% of our total general fund expenditures. And so looking, now that we've gotten teachers and all of our other staff through a payroll cycle, projecting that out along with some estimates for substitute teachers and some extracurricular pay, et cetera, we're right in range with what we've got in here for salaries and fringe benefits, and those numbers did not change at all from the preliminary budget. All of the pages previous to that, it relates to the document that gets submitted to the county and then ultimately to the state as well. The one thing I want to point out really refers back to the memorandum on page 81. And so, of course, with the memorandum, we've included an administrative recommendation at the 101 mil level for budget approval, but would like the board allowance for me to increase the building fund mills from 10 mills to 20 mills, pending the outcome of the election tomorrow, and then also the time frame for the next 13 days until the canvassing on October 11th. But the budget documents are completed from the perspective without the 10 mills increase in the building fund, because of course we don't know what the results will be. I can point you through the changes in the final budget document that would occur, should we have a successful vote tomorrow, and then with the absentee results over the next few days. And that would be on page 82. That's really the summary of the 101 mills that's in this budget. In the middle, right under Fund Group 3, the building fund levy right now is at 10 mills. And we would, pending successful outcome, we would increase that to 20 mills, so that amount would in effect double. And then on flipping forward to page 85 electronically, there's an appropriation at the bottom of that page for fund groups 2 through 7. Fund 3 is capital projects, and that would increase for the 10 mills as well. So those are in effect the two numbers that would change pending the results of the election. One other possible change is related to the calculations on page 82. That's based on the taxable valuation that's been provided to me by the city and the county of, let's see here, it's about just under $258 million for taxable valuation in Grand Forks County. The county and in particular the city has until October 1st to adjust the taxable valuations with all the numbers that they're working through. So that could potentially slightly tweak up or down the numbers on the first page of the budget, just based on the calculation of the mill levy based on a potentially slightly different taxable valuation. Now, last year, the taxable valuation that was approved at the board meeting and the ultimate final taxable valuation from the city, it was within $10,000 of each other. So not expecting there would be a change, but there could be a slight tweak to these numbers, just pending final city numbers that it would be able to access on October 1st. So I said a lot there. Are there any questions I can answer?
Any questions for Mr. Berge? Go ahead, Doug.
I would move approval of the administrative recommendation, including the ability to modify slightly based on tomorrow's election results.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Cynthia. Further questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 7C, which is the general fund financial statement on pages 92 through 96. Mr. Berge.
Thank you, Mr. President. The financial statements before you are the 2 months ended October. October is just a couple days from now. For the 2 months ended August 31st of 2021, revenues for those 2 months just under $7.15 million. Expenditures from the general fund a little bit under $5.5 million, resulting in an excess of revenues over expenses of $1.7 million. The subsequent pages, I've usually got the the budget comparisons, et cetera. Of course, budget was approved just on the previous agenda item. So I will, for next month's financials, I'll of course have all the budget numbers built in here. So really what's before you is the current year 2 months actual activity and the same 2 month actual activity for last year, so that we can see some year-to-date comparisons. With the 2 months, yeah, not necessarily a lot of variability in total, as you can see. The one thing I would point out if we go to page 94, the under B, state sources, the state aid formula payment. The state of North Dakota each year provides an estimate of what that state per pupil payment is and pays that amount through October, and then once file numbers are tabulated at the state level and we got some reports to submit, et cetera, then that amount will be adjusted in November. So right now what we receive for August, September, and October are really in effect placeholders that the state trues up after that point in time. And so you can see actually there's a slight decline in the current year compared to last year. I wouldn't be concerned about that, as again it's an estimate, and the state's estimate a year ago was fairly significantly overstated to start off the year. So I wouldn't let that be a concern at this point. Otherwise, with only 2 months of activity, there can be a lot of variability in the timing and the receipts of payments, and also the incurrence of expenditures. On the expense side, salaries are showing to be up 2.3%. There was some variation in summer school this year compared to last year, and a variety of other impacts. Under the expenditures, equipment and furniture expenditures are significantly down. Last year there was coincided with a significant technology purchase of Chromebooks in the summer, so that really accounts for that variance. One item that sticks out to me is under rent, up almost 121,000 compared to last year. Really, it was the timing of an agreement that we have with the Park District, the timing in the receipt of an invoice and payment. The annual amount is very comparable. It's just kind of a timing difference. So overall, we're revenues in excess of expenditures. This year is a little over 1.7 million. Last year was 1.142 million. A lot of that variance really is timing of some Chromebook expenditures last year versus this year. Otherwise, again, next month I'll have the budget numbers in here, so we'll have an additional report comparing budget to actual as along with our year-to-date actuals for the 2 years.
Scott, on your cover memo on page 92,
Yep.
Can you tell me at the bottom line, what's the time frame that we're recommending approval for the statement?
We're looking for July 1 of 2021 through June 30th. That's a typo on my part there.
Yeah, I was just wondering what it is.
Yes.
Is it July 1 through the end of August?
It'd be July, yep, as I really stated in that first paragraph, we're looking at July 1st, 2021 through August 31st. That bottom sentence, yes, thank you for pointing that out.
Sorry, I didn't see the top one, or I wouldn't have asked.
No, I appreciate you pointing that out. Time period's July 1 through August 31st.
Okay. Questions, comments from board members for Mr. Berge? Go ahead, Cynthia.
So I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question on page, the budget listing on page 91. That was the previous discussion, right? Yeah.
That was the previous discussion, yes.
So,
Well, we're still talking budget. Go for it.
okay, so I feel like I'm the pool person. But the central pool is listed there. Is the 850,000 kind of what was estimated that it would cost to repair the pool?
Good question. No, it really depends on the extent of repairs and the type of repairs. If we want to make that facility useful for, say, a handful of years, or refurbish it for another 30 years. I had central pool in there really with the preliminary budget. Actually at $1 million, thanks for pointing that out. I've adjusted that to $850,000 from the perspective of the sale of West is going to generate $150,000. That would go into a building fund to allow for some additional dollars to pay for construction costs. But really, that's somewhat in there as a placeholder, for some, as I added to the description, really as some potential facility emergency type expenditures. Since I've been here, pretty much all 3 years, at some point during the school year, we've had to amend the general fund budget to allow for some, $1 million plus in additional expenditures that come up, whether it be a boiler failure, et cetera. This budget, has some additional dollars in there. Now, whether it would be related to the central pool, there's more decisions to be made there. A week and a half ago, there was a meeting between the city, Park District, and university in regards just to our pool facilities across our entire community. And so there's more work to be done there. So, as to our central pool, there's more work to do actually both internally in our district and externally with our partners to determine next steps there. But what that net $850,000 is really $150,000 of some additional dollars related to the sale of West, along with, in effect, I created like $1 million line item net of that $150,000 for some potential emergency repairs. Now, whether some of that would go to the pool, that's yet to be determined. But didn't really want to submit a budget and then come back mid-year with a request to adjust upward construction expenditures when, as long as I've been here, and I think even previous to that, we've had to amend the budget partway through the year. So it really allows for an additional $1 million of potential construction costs.
Okay, thank you. And I have a few other questions, so that helps me a lot. I appreciate that. So on page, I might have to jump around because on page 95, when you talk about rent, I wanted to ask the question, we're not renting the Herald building anymore, correct?
That is correct, right.
So this rent is for like community high school?
There's some various line items. The significant amount that you see there, the $120,000 increase. I think it's $105,000 to $110,000. It relates to a facility agreement that we have with the Grand Forks Park District that we've had for multiple years. The timing of the invoice last year was after school had started and was timed out a little bit earlier, but it's for an existing agreement. No, we're not increasing rent significantly across the district in any way.
So I understand that we are using the Grand Forks Housing Authority buildings. Do we pay them anything for like the use of the Casager Center?
Yes, Casager Center and one other facility.
LaGrave.
LaGrave, thank you, Dr. Brenner.
So that's in that rent category as well?
Yes. And some of that, again, there's some timing and the variability of rent. Some of the rental agreements are, the timing, they may be invoiced quarterly or something of that nature, not necessarily monthly. But there will be costs, yes, related to those two facilities, yes.
Thank you, I appreciate that information. And then my last question is bus. So bus tickets on page 94 of the electronic copy. It looks like, and I'm trying to remember, I don't have Dr. Brenner's Friday Focus in front of me right now with the bus information, but it appears to me that that's an increase. I don't know how that sits compared to other years.
Yep, so the bus tickets, that line item is been variable, particularly in the last couple of years with, last year with COVID at the beginning of the year and et cetera. Bus tickets in the current year, that $3,000, some of those dollars have been refunded as a result of our bus issues and working with the city and not charging our students at this point in time. Some of those items haven't been refunded yet. There, in some cases haven't been requests. We're working through our transportation concerns, and at some point during this year, if we're, depending on the situation, we may charge for bus rides once again. But at this point, I'd say, probably a fourth of that has been refunded as of this point.
That's good. Thank you so much. That completes my questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. Any other questions or comments from school board members? Go ahead, Amber.
Do we know the status of our ESSER 3 application?
Status is the application was approved in, it needed to be submitted, I think it was August 17th was the deadline. And so we have received approval there. Now the process is, it's different from the first round of ESSER, and this is in the web grant system. There's some items that we will be submitting on a monthly basis for reimbursement, and there's some narratives and related to learning loss, some additional data that needs to be submitted regarding reimbursement, but the application itself has been approved.
Any further questions or comments? If not, the administrative recommendation is to approve the general fund financial statement for July 1, 2021 through August 30th, 2021. We have a motion by Jeff and a second by Chris. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to item 7D, which is designation of North Dakota School Board Association convention delegates. It's on electronic packet, page 97, Dr. Brenner.
Thank you. It's the final page of the packet. Right now, we have one board member who has indicated he'll be attending the convention. That's Doug Carpenter. And the board is allowed up to 2 delegates, and those 2 delegates should be approved here under action at the board table. And right now, we don't know if anybody else is intending on attending other than Mr. Carpenter. So, oh, I'm sorry, up to 5 school board members, not 2. Thank you for that, Cindy. So I would just open it up for conversation to see if anybody is planning on going, and then we would want those people to make their arrangements with Cindy by October 13th, please.
Anybody else able to attend? I don't see any. Is there any way of doing it the old Chicago way and giving Mr. Carpenter 5 votes to go to the meeting?
I don't believe you can vote proxy at this one.
So it looks like right now we have Mr. Carpenter there, so can I get a motion to approve Doug as a delegate for the, we have a motion by Cynthia and a second by Amber. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Doug, thank you for doing that. Let's move on to item 8, which is other. 8A is announcements. Dr. Brenner.
On October 11th, we have a school board meeting planned. We also have a school tour at Lake Agassiz at 5:30. And to Ms. Flynn's point earlier, celebrating success was on the agenda that evening as well. To Dr. Lewis's point earlier, that's also Indigenous Peoples Day, and there'll be a celebration down at City Hall. So I would suggest that we take the school tour and celebrating success off the agenda along with a couple of other pieces, and either start the board meeting at 5:30, if that works for everybody, or not later than 6, and then keep the board meeting to roughly an hour.
Thoughts?
I
Go ahead, Amber.
I haven't been able to attend a lot of the facility tours because my husband has a new work schedule. So I would just barely make it probably at 5:30, if not be late. Certainly just one board member, but wanted to say I would certainly be in favor of a 6 start and then keeping it to an hour.
Cynthia?
Will we have another opportunity, do you think, to tour Lake Agassiz? Because we want to be equal with this plan, right?
Yeah, we'll have to take a look at our, that probably would move to next year, because we've got basically almost every meeting that we do have a tour, or at least every other meeting. So we can take a look at that, but as of this, at this point in time, we're deferring it to next year rather than trying to make it up in another time.
I mean, just 2022 within this 2021-22 academic year, or?
Within this academic year.
Okay.
Other thoughts by board members? Is 5:30 doable for people, or is it better to push till 6? Shannon?
I'm out of town on a business trip that day, so I won't be here in person anyway, but I am going to try to call in.
Okay. I think the other thing.
I had it in my calendar to be there at 5:30, so it's not a problem for me to move a meeting to 5:30.
The other thing we would have to do is put a limit on the time for public comments, which is at the discretion of the chair. So I can limit public comments for that day. So why don't we try for 5:30 on October 11th, so we can try and get down to celebrating success down in City Hall. Thank you. Any other announcements, Dr. Berner? Okay. Dr. Lewis, you have any announcements? Brady, you got any announcements? Okay, go ahead, Brady, you're first if you have any. Okay. Mr. Berge, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't think we've had a finance announcement ever,
Oh,
so
yeah.
this could be a one-timer thing.
Well, I just wanted to announce that you all and anybody in the public can come see me at the Alaris Center from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. tomorrow, and have the opportunity to vote during that time too.
Well, I don't want to do the old Chicago way. I've already voted absentee, so I better not vote a second time. So,
Well, you can still come see me, just don't vote twice. Yes.
any other announcements? Go ahead, Doug.
There is a finance committee meeting Thursday at 5 o'clock.
Thank you. Any others? Board requests for future consideration. Seeing none. Item 8C, the last thing, is school board norms. Amber, how did we do?
Pretty good.
Thank you all. We are adjourned.